This is a reading from the notebooks by Maria Valtorta, 1945 to 1950. This is a continuation of the January 28th, 1947 reading. Where there is no supernatural law, it is hard for there to be moral law, and always imperfectly. And where human morality is imperfect or absent, the threefold concupiscence is alive, in whole or in part. But if most souls seem to deny the natural memory of and desire for God and their will, which involves tending towards a joyful end with their way of acting, it must be recalled that in man there is the carnal creature as well as the spiritual one, and that man has free will, which always serves the stronger part. Now, if one weakens one's soul with vices and sins, it will certainly become weak, while the animal part will become fortified and overcome the weaker part to the point of killing it. But not on this account can it be denied that the soul is created with a capacity for remembering and desiring its end naturally. The soul's nature is a spiritual nature. The soul thus has spiritual desires, even if, because of the privation of grace, those who are not regenerated by baptism, it has only natural desires for the spiritual kingdom from which it comes, and where it instinctively feels the Supreme Spirit to be present. Furthermore, in the souls regenerated in the grace of baptism and maintained and fortified therein by the other sacraments, the soul's being, attracted to its end, takes place in divine fashion, because grace, that is, God himself, draws his beloved children to himself, ever closer, more and more in the light, the more they rise by degrees in spirituality, so that separation diminishes and seeing is more intense, knowledge vaster, comprehension broader, and love more perfect, to the point of arriving at contemplation, which is already fusion and union of the creature with the Creator, a temporary but indelible transforming act, for the embrace of the fire of the divinity closing over its enraptured creature impresses a new character on these living beings who are already separated from humanity and spiritualized into seraphim, expert in the wisdom God gives them, for he gives himself to them as they give themselves to him. For this reason, it is proper to specify that the inspired writer has God as the author, God who reveals or illuminates mysteries or truths as he pleases, for these instruments of his, spurring and moving them with supernatural virtues, assisting them in writing in such fashion that they rightly conceive with their intelligence and faithfully seek to write, and with suitable means and infallible truth express all of the things and only those things which are commanded by him, God. It is God who with a threefold action illuminates the intellect, so that it will know the truth without error, by either revelation in the case of still unknown truths, or exact recollection, if they are truths already established, but still rather incomprehensible for human reason. It moves so that what the inspired one comes to know supernaturally will be written faithfully. It assists and directs so that the truths will be stated in the form and number which God wills, with veracity and clarity, so that they will be known to others for the good of many, with the very words of God in the direct teachings, or with the words of those inspired when they describe visions or repeat supernatural lessons. The work which is given to men through Little John is not a canonical book, but it remains an inspired book, which I am giving to help you understand certain passages in the canonical ones, and especially to comprehend what my time as master was like, and know me, I, the Word, in my words, neither I nor much less the spokesman, who because of his utter ignorance in this field is not even able to distinguish between dogmatic theology and mystical or ascetical theology, and does not know the subtleties of definitions or the conclusions of councils, but is able to love and obey, and this is enough for me, nor do I want anything else from the spokesman. Neither I nor he say that the work is a canonical book. In all truth, though, I tell you that it is an inspired book, for the instrument is not capable of writing pages which he does not even understand, unless I myself explain them to him, to take away his fear. And yet, since in the hours when he is a spokesman, that is, he is seized by me as if by a divine eagle carrying him into the kingdom of light, so that he will see and come back into your midst, bringing you gems of supernatural value, Little John is in the wise truth of vision and comprehension. He uses the term create to speak of the formation of souls by God's will. Notebook ST, page 63. I speak once more. I use the term generation in the dictation to give you the measure of your dignity as children of God, for God. But I repeat this, too. If that is an obstacle for you to believe, go ahead and replace generation with creation, and be at peace over this trifle which makes you skittish. The continuous creation of souls by the Father does not mean pre-existence, as you say, stating that I said so, and the souls remembering does not mean pre-existence, but it cannot be denied either that through the instant of creation, though the instant of creation is extremely rapid, the soul, an intelligent spiritual substance, created by the most perfect one, can be formed with awareness of its origin. Mustn't God, the Creator, who has given relative reason to lower creatures, and extremely vast reason to human creatures, and very swift as well as vast intelligence to angelic creatures, have given immediate, vast intelligence to the created soul? Isn't it created by Him, like angels, men, and animals? Can it alone, then, this flame begotten by fire, be darkness or ice? Can it alone be so slow, stupid, blind, deaf, forgetful, and brutish as not to possess even the rudimentary notions of instinct, spurring animals to choose foods and elements and climates which are favorable for them to live and to procreate, inferior even to vegetables that sense there is life in the sun, and that even when planted in a dark place lean towards a hole through which light is descending, and come out into the open air through it in order to live? O men, and just to deny, so as to bring pain to my spokesman, can you go so far as to call the soul inferior to plants? The soul, this wonderful substance which I, in a sublime metaphor, call the spiritual blood of eternal, powerful, holy God, blood of the Father. I am speaking in metaphors, I repeat, which is alive in you and makes you immortal, powerful, and holy as long as it is alive, that is, as long as it is joined to God by charity. The soul, this part of heaven, and heaven is light and wisdom, which is contained in you, so that the infinite would have a throne in you that was still heaven, and which contains you so that the sanctifying embrace of heaven will remain protective around your humanity as it fights the good fight. Do you perhaps object that it no longer has the integral intelligence of the first soul because it is stained and damaged by original sin? I reply, first of all, that nothing impure emerges from creative thought. Original sin is in man, and in the children of man, not in God, not in the being created by God then, but on becoming incarnated in the man conceived by man, the soul contracts the inheritance connected with the descendants of Adam, except in the case of an exceptional, singular decision by God. Secondly, I remind you that the most impure being, he who was Lucifer and is now Satan, did not lose his powerful intelligence because he changed from an archangel into a demon, but uses his very sharp intelligence for evil rather than good, as he would have used it if he had remained an archangel. How do you answer then, if I ask you why Satan remembers God and is intelligent? Do you have no reasons to set against my assertion? Do you have nothing to object? No, you can make no objection, for one must either deny what you teach or admit that Satan is intelligent and remembers God to the point that he hates him, as he does precisely because he remembers him as he does, with the power of his spiritual intellect, and torments you as he does precisely because he is perspicacious in knowing how to choose the methods suitable for making you fall, in accordance with your human self. The Catechism specifies that the sinful angels were excluded from paradise and condemned to hell, but no definition deals with the loss of intelligence in demons, because the fact that their intelligence subsists is demonstrated by the perspicacity of their actions to harm you. Souls, remember. Why? Because as God, to temper the severity of the condemnation, at the same time gave Adam the hope of a redemption, and of that redemption, so too He left him the memory of the blessed time, so that it would be of assistance to him in the pain of exile, and a holy stimulus for the children of Adam to love him, who for them was the unknown one. And not only this, but on creating souls for these children of man, God did not deprive him of that natural inclination towards the divinity, by which itself alone can help to reach the end for which man has been created, to love the Lord, the omnipotent and omnipresent God, who is incorporeal all, fills the infinite, and which man senses more or less precisely, and sees to be in everything surrounding, penetrating, or striking him. In savages, it will be in the blast of lightning, or the enduring radiance of the aurora borealis. For idolaters, it will be in the power of the lion, or the amphibious life of the alligator. For believers, in revealed but not perfect religions, in natural phenomena assumed to be the actions and manifestations of individual gods. In the educated man, who is a thinker or scientist, in astral occurrences, or in the extraordinary organization of bodies, in the believer, in addition to doctrine, in the very life of the soul, which manifests itself with its lights and pulsations, corresponding to other more ardent pulsations of an eternal love that loves it, in the wonder of being born and the mystery of dying, one part of the human, and the other to live through a truer life. But all human beings, in all things, sense an invisible, powerful presence, whether they deny it, and in denying it, they already admit that it exists, for one denies only what exists, and knows to be believed in by many others. Hate it, confessing with hatred that it exists, or love it, proclaiming with love that they believe it is real, and hope one day to be able not indeed to believe in it, but to enjoy it. God has done this. He has left the inclination towards supreme good in man. And what is this if not memory? And what do you think about it? That he could not do so? He who is omnipotent and has been governing creation for millennia without effort or fatigue, and without pausing for an instant, creates and judges souls, and simultaneously knows all their actions, foreknows them, since the past, present, and future are a single is before his thought. He follows their development and judges them with no confusion or error, judging the souls that at his command leave the flesh to which they were sent, and return to the heavenly world, supercreated, recreated, or I would have to say, destroyed by the free desire of the will. But this term for you that always grasps the material sense of words and not their spirit, would prompt you to cry out your anathema. I will thus say, ugly, filthy, mutilated, and deformed, from having voluntarily erased the memory of the divine. For it is this memory, above all, more than any lesson that can be learned in schools of any kind, which teaches the soul to pursue virtues out of love for its God, and in the hope of possessing him one day, beyond life, in the life without end. Among all many gifts which love has preserved for fallen man, this is truly the highest and most active. I am speaking of souls in general, not of those of Catholic Christians, members of the mystical body, vivified by grace, which is the gift of gifts. This natural inclination towards supreme good, which is the spiritual memory of God, sometimes so faint that the other two parts of man do not notice it, though guided by it in thought and governed by it in action, is a stimulus towards seeking the divinity, acting so as to be worthy of it, and in a word, living in such a way as to come to be reunited with it. Because of it, souls create a religion for themselves, if they do not already possess one, which may be mistaken through ignorance of the truth, but which remains love for the divinity, that is, conformity to the end for which man was created, to love and serve God on earth, and enjoy him eternally, immediately, and completely, or after a more or less lengthy period. Memory creates love, justice. The justice of the creature generates a greater love for it on God's part, and the more love and justice increase in the creature, the clearer knowledge becomes. With love, then, the memory of God grows more and more, for as I said, memory is knowledge of love, and where love is, God is present. Moreover, when souls have grace as a light for remembering and a voice for learning, what do you say? That this grace does not make you very much like innocent Adam, and thus capable of knowing God? What do you say? That when goodwill and the work of sanctification are joined to grace, which is restored to you through my merits, your knowledge of God does not come ever closer to that which was Adam's joy? In truth, I tell you that this is what happens, and a memory in the saints still living on earth is no longer a memory, but knowledge. Are you astonished at my assertion? Weren't the patriarchs and prophets deprived of grace, but just transported into the vision of God? And didn't they hear his voice? Didn't they gaze upon the glory of God and wonderful heaven? Now, when Abraham reached the age of 99, the Lord appeared to him. Genesis chapter 17, verse 1. And the Lord appeared to Moses in a fiery flame in the midst of a bush. Exodus chapter 3, verse 2. And when Moses had ascended the mountain, the cloud covered the mountain, and the glory of the Lord, and Moses having entered into the cloud. Exodus 24. I saw someone resembling a man, and within him and around him I saw a sort of electrum. Ezekiel chapter 1, verses 26 to 27. And I heard a man's voice shouting from the midst of the Ulai, and saying, There appeared Gabriel, and he instructed me. Daniel chapter 8, verse 16, chapter 9, verse 21 and 22. Just to recall some points where it is stated in the canonical books that even those deprived of grace were granted heavenly visions or words. To know God and converse with him in the interior Eden is, indeed, to see and foresee, for God has not changed over the course of millennia, and his lessons for his chosen ones are vast, full, and luminous, as with the two innocents who were naked and were not ashamed, because they did not know the poor sciences of matter, but only the sublime wisdom of love. And after this, can you still impugn the words written by the instrument as if they were errors? I do not even consider the possibility that you could deem them an error by the master, or fail to recognize who the one dictating is from the abundance and wisdom of the gift. After this, can you still impugn the truth that souls have a memory of God, as if it were an error of the instrument, which, the more the soul evolves in justice, is more intense, and very intense when the state of grace is joined to the justice of the creature, that is, filiation received from God, perfect when, as in the most holy Mary, there is an eternal virginity of the Spirit, uncontaminated by contact with sin, and there is a fullness of grace, complete innocence, possession of wisdom, and perfect charity, so perfect in Mary Most Holy that no other creature will ever have it. Tell me, servants of my mother, what is Most Holy Mary for you? The new Eve who knows God as the Ancient One did? No, more than Eve, for in addition to being the innocent one, daughter, spouse, and mother of God, contemplated as such by God from all eternity, she is the ewe alongside the Lamb, the victim, consumed with the divine host to make you knowers of God. And now reread, stripping your minds of your fig leaf robes, which you have sewed around your intellects, and which intercept your vision. Reread the passages where there is mention of memory, knowledge, and sweet conversations of the threefold unity, gathered into the immaculate heart of the woman full of grace, with her adoring soul. Reread the passages where I speak of the operations of grace, which is light and wisdom, and which makes the memory of God more and more luminous, and, when joined to justice, makes memory increasingly perfect knowledge, sometimes lofty, always holy, in the spirit of the saints, and then pray that a new Pentecost will take place in your intelligence, and that all the gifts of the Spirit, the teacher of every truth, will enter to renew you and set you aflame once more in that divine likeness which is supernatural love with supernatural beauty, without which union and likeness and comprehension are impossible. On your knees in the humble spirit of the humble, before him who speaks to you, because he has mercy on you, pastors and lambs, and takes a non-entity, precisely because she is such, and because he loves to repeat the gesture he made before the concupiscent humanity of the 12, to confound with his divine wisdom the poor human science of the learned, who linger to count the threads on the ziziths, which are dusty after having been closer to the ground than to heaven, and because of this futile, hair-splitting work, cease to gather and conserve the luminous pearls whose context the work is. Ziziths, for those not understanding the metaphor, are useless wasting of time, and even more useless displays of human knowledge, used to determine whether the physical capacity of a place or the number of its inhabitants, deduced from human work long after my time, and thus inexact, correspond to what an instrument has asserted, or whether the period and stay in a place to which he refers, always collated according to a measure which men have created for themselves, correspond to the infinitesimal fraction of time which they deem perfect. But tell me, is it the number of days, the size of a country, or the total of its inhabitants that interests you, or is it the work's doctrine? As regard the former, thousands and thousands of human authors can give you abundant fodder. As for the latter, only I can give you what ought to be sought in the first place, for only what I give you is of use to you for eternal life. The rest is hay, which, after being digested, is expelled and becomes refuse. You will not enter heaven because you know how many days someone was in a place, or how many citizens were in a city, but because you have perfected yourselves by drawing luminous life from Word who is life and light. Love me more than science, bless me and not your knowledge, and also love the boy I have taken, to set him in your midst, and along with me bless the Father, Lord of heaven and earth, for having revealed himself once more to a little one instead of revealing himself to the learned. A little one, a boy, a non-entity, yes, but a non-entity consumed by the desire to serve and love God and make him known, a non-entity who by himself alone has awakened in himself the memory of God, ever more intense, a non-entity who has consumed the diaphragms of humanity with his love and voluntary holocaust, a non-entity who has come to the light more than existence, and honors, a non-entity who has plunged so deeply into the total freedom of contemplating God alone that he has lost sight of everything that is not God, a non-entity dead to all that for most is of vital concern, but eternally alive because he has died to live in the Lord. God, I am telling you so, shows his kingdom not to the learned, but to those who are illuminated by grace and are living in love, and it is God alone who chooses, takes, and comes to rest on the summit of the mountain, in the place where heaven is so close that the Spirit, burning, can cry out what should have been the cry of every man, "Here is my God, I see him, I understand him, I know him, I am devoured and recreated by love." Little John, you can also remind them that man has a guardian angel, and that this spirit is not inactive alongside man, upon whom he reflects the lights which he has, as an angel, mirrors when worshipping infinite light. Be at peace, soul of mine. January 31st, 1947. Prayed to and beseeched by me so that he would temper his severity, I could say, and it would be more appropriate, his disdain, and agree to respond, at least for the sake of my peace, regarding the famous 3 months which provoked the examiners. Jesus said to me this morning at 5:45, "You shall modify the vision on March 28, 1944, with these words in the first period. The two spouses head for the temple, first of all along the streets which are already crowded for the approaching Paschal feast. Joseph leaves the 2 donkeys in a stable after having fed them, and goes with Mary to worship the Lord. When corrected in this way, it will give them the more precise sensation that Mary went to her cousins during the Passover octave to be with her while Zechariah was away from Hebron, to appear, as was the obligation of every male, before the Lord during the feast of unleavened bread." Deuteronomy 16:16. That is, about a month after the Annunciation. As for the time spent in Hebron, I will tell you, precisely because it is you, my little John, who suffer for the sake of justice, that 48 plus 40 are exactly 88, or 2 days less than 90, which add up to 3 months. Regarding original sin, dictation on March 5, 1944, in Notebook 2, Q, page 55, and the dictations of Jesus and Mary in the pre-gospel, following upon the Annunciation, page 69, FF, up to page 74. Jesus says, "The sapiential lesson is so clear and exhaustive, suitable for instructing the ignorant and persuading those who, not having faith, or having little, because of rationalism or other factors, are no longer satisfied with fables, that there is nothing to add or remove to the slightest degree. Only voluntary blindness can fail to see the wise truth contained in this dictation. You shall join the dictation on March the 5th, 1944, to this point, so that they will have the whole lesson before their eyes, and if they are humble, they will understand the truth." I also took the liberty of repeating to Jesus, present, and so good, a question I had been asked by a Servite father. I don't know exactly who, but I think it was Father Berti, and I don't know whether it was by his own initiative or as suggested by others, concerning Jesus' descent into hell, which I had accidentally come across again, referred to on January 15, 1944, and which seemed to have provoked someone. He replied, "Father Berti's letter then arrived, asking me to write a note to be presented to the Holy Father, and Jesus, smiling, completely luminous, said to me as soon as the letter was brought to me, 'This is why precisely now, after 4 months, I am satisfying you, and for this priest to whom I previously told you could communicate this point. As for the other points, you know who you must give them to, and when, and how to notify them. And now listen, for I shall repeat the beginning.' Jesus says, 'You shall give these words to Father Berti. You now know it was he who asked you about them.' When I gave the dictation on January 15, 1944 to my Maria and said, when I descended there to take those who awaited my coming out of Limbo, I experienced the horror of that horror, and if something done by God were not immutable because it is perfect, I would have wished to make it less atrocious, for I am love, and I felt pain over that horror. I wanted to speak of the different places in the hereafter, where the deceased were grouped together in general, and called hell, as opposed to paradise, where God is. When, in the superabundance of my joy, after the consummation of the sacrifice, I was able to open limbo for the just, and take many spirits out of purgatory, I shook with horror, contemplating in my thought that only for the place of damnation was there no redemption or transformation of horror. But I did not enter there. It was not proper or useful to do so. Are you astonished that I took many souls out of purgatory as well? Consider, if a holy mass can free someone from purgatory, and always serves to abbreviate and sweeten purgation, what must the real sacrifice of the divine Lamb have meant for those in purgatory? As the priest and victim, I applied my merits and my blood to them, and it whitened the souls which had not yet been rendered white by the white fire of purgative charity. Footnote 292. An application of Revelation chapter 7, verses 13 and 14. Send him this, and my blessing. February 3rd, 1947. Jesus says, the deepest reason for the gift of this work, among the many others which my spokesman knows, is that in these times, in which the modernism condemned by my holy vicar Pius X is corrupted into increasingly harmful human doctrines, the Holy Church, represented by my vicar, will have additional material to combat those who deny the supernatural character of dogmas, the divinity of Christ, the truth of Christ, God and man, real and perfect in both the faith and the history concerning him which has been handed on, gospel, Acts of the Apostles, apostolic letters and tradition, the doctrine of Paul and John, and the councils of Nicaea, Ephesus, and Chalcedonia, and other recent ones, as my true doctrine, orally taught or inspired by me, my wisdom, unlimited because it is divine, the divine origin of the dogmas, the sacraments, and the one, holy, Catholic, and apostolic Church, the universality and continuity until the end of the ages of the gospel given by me for all men, the nature, perfect from the outset, of my doctrine, which was not shaped, as it is through successive transformations, but just as it was given, the doctrine of Christ, of the time of grace, of the kingdom of heaven, and of the kingdom of God in you, divine, perfect, immutable, the good news for all who are thirsty for God. Over against the red dragon, with 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 diadems on its head, that with its tail drags behind it 1/3 of the stars in the sky, and causes them to plunge down. And I tell you that they really do plunge down, even lower than the earth. And that pursues the woman, over against the beasts of the sea and the earth, that many, too many, worship, seduced as they are by their appearance and wonders. Set my angel flying in the midst of heaven, holding the eternal gospel wide open, even to the pages which have been closed until now, so that men can be saved through its light from the coils of the great serpent with 7 faces, seeking to strangle them in his darkness. And at my return I will still find faith and charity in the hearts of the persevering, and they will be more numerous than the work of Satan, and men lead one to hope that they may be. Footnote 293. Daniel chapter 7, Revelation 12 and 13, and 14, 6 to 7, and chapter 17 and 20.